main pieces I got when you were talking about, people wanting to have a demon to blame, a Trump, an anti-vaxxer, or this or that, is that, well, then we're dodging self-responsibility. So if we're victims and it's everyone else's fault, then we're never going to take whatever responsibility is necessary for us to shift and course correct. I've been tracking what's going on right now for 22 years, and I've been trying my best to stop it. When it happened, I wasn't surprised. But for me, it was like, well, where have I dropped the ball? Like, where is my apathy or, my disinterest in the political process contributing to this? So I feel the same about my audience, where it's like, I trust my audience to be self-responsible and to take responsibility for their triggers, and to trust that I'm coming from a place of purity and good intention. Of course, that always takes tweaking. But I think if I'm constantly second guessing my audience's ability to be triggered, then I'm doing them a disservice.
Right. That's true. Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of where I'm coming to. I just can't caretake everybody's triggers,
No, and I think it's, I think that kind of, from my perspective, it's a type of codependence that comes from kindness and comes from compassion. But I think that's part of the reason why we're at the place that we are today, is because we don't trust one another to have the tools to lose at tag, to not be picked for dodgeball, all these things that have made us so much softer and more sensitive. So, yeah, I feel like it's just, at this point, if anyone thinks that you're not kind-hearted and that you're trying to hurt people, then they have work to do on themselves.
Yeah. And I'm not so concerned about whether people think that I'm kind-hearted or I'm trying to hurt people. It's more like, what's the actual impact that my words are having on society? And like, sometimes, I'm really questioning whether my best service is to continue writing expository prose. Like, maybe, I've been doing a little more work with story, with other ways of using the power of word, besides besides making an argument.
Yeah. This is something I've, I'm a journalist. That's my background, but these days I'm demonized as what some people would call conspiracy theorists. And I know that the history of that word, so I don't necessarily cozy up to it. But, I've spoken to people in the community about it, of like, I don't know how effective we're going to be when it's like, an angry person yelling at the camera and speaking in like sort of didactic, instructive languaging, versus being more entertaining, more metaphorical, using more poetry and fiction to deliver the message, kind of like medicine in, some peanut butter or something.
Yeah, right. And ultimately, one of my favorite sayings is, you can't reason somebody out of a belief that they didn't reason themselves into to begin with.
Oh, I like that.
So our beliefs are not isolated intellectual constructs. Mm-hmm. They're part of a state of being. Mm-hmm. They are like the top layer of a state of being. And I know this because I've seen time and again, when somebody has an impactful experience that changes who they are, then their beliefs quickly and easily change around that. So as agents of change, maybe it's more important, maybe we can just trust that whatever healing that we embody, whatever vibration that we embody, that will be a lot more attractive than the logical arguments we can make and the evidence that we can cite. Because we've all had the experience of the futility of logic and evidence in changing anybody's mind. Yeah. Something else has to change. And maybe the vehicle of change, like, is when, like, we really pay attention to somebody and see them with eyes of love, mm-hmm. and peace. Mm-hmm. And they pick up on that somehow, and they're a little bit less resistant. And maybe then you do say a couple things about what you think about something, and it lands in a way that it ordinarily wouldn't. There's not as much resistance. Mm-hmm. And they're like, whatever this guy's on, I want some of that, know? So I think that, there's people have an aversion to characters like David Icke, and a lot of the well-known conspiracy theorists, like, there's an energy there of, I mean, there's a mix, but there's an energy of despair, because that creeps in, because if you really believe that the world is in the hands of a super powerful, invisible elite, then what hope is there for the world if they're in control of the media, of the money system, of everything? And so that despair is not attractive to people. Whereas, it's attractive to some. It's actually kind of attractive to me. There's part of me that feels a perverse comfort in my irredeemable victimhood. But more and more, I'm attracted to the new story of how change happens, what's possible, and who I am. That requires data points that do not fit that narrative, that show that reality is not a contest of force versus force, that miraculous synchronicities can happen in correspondence with a release of control on my part. And therefore that we are powerful far beyond what the conspiracy narrative says we are. And I don't want to draw like too hard a distinction here, because usually the conspiracy, when I say conspiracy narrative, I'm talking about the capital C conspiracy, okay? Because as I said before, I think there are all kinds of conspiracies and cover-ups going on, and corruption in the pharmaceutical industry and the regulatory agencies, all that, okay? But the big C conspiracy, usually there's an element of that narrative that is about awakening. They're afraid of us awakening to our true power. And so the paradox is that the capital C conspiracy isn't actually powerful. But there is some kind of mixed message in the narrative that gives them power that they don't have. And that radiates out and I think turns people off. I just spent some time with Zach Bush. It seems like I know you have like some comebacks here, but I just spent some time with Zach Bush. He's become a dear friend, and he's like, I mean, he's fully aware of all of these narratives, but he basically decides that he is not living in that reality. He's living in the reality where the people in positions of power want to change. And it's maybe requires courage for them to do so, and overcoming a lot of institutional inertia and going against what their peer group says or seems to think, but they really secretly want to. And he's going to give them an opportunity to do that. And he's like, yeah, we've already won. Everything that needs to happen for this world transforming movement to blossom is already done. The work is already done and it's happening. And that belief corresponds to a state of being that's the result of his personal journey, I guess, and whatever blessings he's received in his life. And so that's the level that when I'm writing about, the COVID politics or the social dynamics of it, the psychological, sometimes I have the feeling that I'm not getting down to this level, because I just have to clear away too much smoke, and I'm like, I want to talk about this level. And maybe that means speaking to a smaller audience. Because a lot of people are going to have already turned this conversation off.
My audience knows what they're in for.
Okay.